I've worked with some kids where they only eat, chocolate covered candies, chocolate syrup and this other thing, which is detrimental.
Drew, did she hit on a chord there or something? I just saw that body movement.
Look, my mom was also a strong advocate of healthy nutrition, and it's something that Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gough Jr. and Drew Soleyn. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gough Jr. of the Dad Central Show and Dad Central, and the man who has that growth on that visage.
That would be Drew Soleyn of Dad Central and the Dad Central Show. But it is Movember, right? So the month is not quite over. This is, I know it's not a mustache, but it's my ode to Movember. So that's why it's on, and it's going to be here till at least the end of this month. So I'm persevering through it. I'm not normally having the facial hair, but I don't know. Doesn't look too bad, does it?
Yeah, it looks okay on you. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Let's do this. The Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of men, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. All right. So Drew said, I don't know what we're going to talk about. So he's already given us some more runway to chat about the facial hair. So here's the question. Does your partner like you with the beard or without the beard?
That's a good question. I don't know if Kristen, she likes me anyway, is what I think.
Nice out, brother, man. Nice out. Well done. What do you like?
Yeah, I think I prefer the clean shaven, short hair look. So I was looking at some photos from the wedding we went to in the middle of October, and I was like, that looks like a different person. I like that look better, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting about facial hair. Many, many years ago, I had a mentor and I started to grow a beard, and he said, you should save that. I go, why? He goes, because people feel like you're hiding your face.
Really?
Yeah, he said that. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. A little interesting take. I said, And funny enough, ever since that day, and that's a long time ago, I've never grown a beard, but beards with dads and men are a fashionable thing now, especially the long ones, the big long ones. Like the beard care is a whole industry in itself now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it's really.
I've never, the fact that I can actually grow somewhat of a beard, as you can see from the sides, not really. I always said I was just late hitting puberty. I could never really grow facial hair, so But
and another thing. While we're recording this, Drew, you just came back from some rounds. You did some
it was really cool. I had a great opportunity to travel to Sandy Lake, Ontario. For those who don't know where that is, it's way up north. It's actually, I was presenting to an Indigenous community in Sandy Lake and talking about fatherhood, sharing some of my stories, and really hoping to inspire them to engage and give them some practical tools to, be the fathers and a positive influence in their children's lives. So, yeah, it was a cool experience. It's part of working with one of my clients, the Anishinaabe Aski Nation, and supporting their family well-being program. So, real honor to be able to do that and help support that community.
One takeaway from your journey?
The desire of dads everywhere to engage with their kids.
Well, this is another thing we have in common. The passion for fathers, and both of us have gone into Indigenous communities. And for me, I did my first journey in Indigenous and doing fatherhood back like 2 weeks before the pandemic. And it's never left me. And I think one take away from me was the respect they have for elders.
Is very powerful.
Huge learning, and it's been ingrained with me ever since that trip to really respect my elders in that regard. So more travels to come for both of us in the world of fatherhood. But today we have another new friend, and our new friend is Melissa Doman of Melissa Doman Sleep Consulting. Now, Drew, you got your 7-year-old having fun with sleep?
7-month-old.
7-month-old, sorry.
Yeah, and I remember I started with twins and trying to have twins, infants trying to sleep. So yeah, sleep was not easy to come by. We learned and grew, but now it's a whole new dynamic with Eliana and 4 other kids, so that are a lot older. So lots of challenges, I think, when it comes to sleep.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to this conversation. And I was speaking with Melissa before she came to the green room, and I said, there's a gentleman who's a fairly popular Instagram page, and his handle is "Sleep is for Suckers." And she went, "What?" So let's bring Melissa up. And Melissa is here. What is going on? How you doing?
Hi, good morning.
How's your day going?
So far, so good. So far, so good.
It's sleep for suckers?
No, sleep is for everybody. Sleep is for anybody who wants to just be at their best, do great things. It is 100% absolutely necessary. And those sleep is for suckers people make me eye roll, to say the least. I'll say that.
Well, before Drew jumps in, and you said a lot of great things already, but one of the things I liked what you said is be at their best. And that's one of the things that's very important for us with Dad Central. And that's one of the reasons why we do what we do and we do the show, is we want dads to be at their best. So when you said that, I said, got to mention it alignment wise, beautiful. So Drew, I'm handing it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ed, and Melissa, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you here. I can also share, I believe I read a study recently that talked about, they deprived adults of sleep for about 6 weeks. And then they sort of tested some important markers. And essentially, being sleep deprived for that long, it's almost like a certain level of intoxication in terms of loss of function, loss of awareness, loss of these key, functional markers. So you're nowhere near your best, actually, it's like you're almost intoxicated. So yeah. I definitely believe in the importance and power of sleep. And that's why I think so many parents struggle with this topic. But, we like to start with a little bit of the backstory of our guests a little bit and how they came to what they're doing now. And so maybe could you tell us a little bit about your journey of how you then got to become a sleep consultant?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I would say my journey probably started back in 2008, 2009. I started working with kids with special needs. My area of expertise is actually, in physical and mobility development. So I was working with a lot of kids who are immobile, low mobility, but of a variety of different diagnoses. And where I was working at the time, the focus was really on just what can we do to help the brain in order to help with the symptoms that we're all seeing, right? So really tight muscles, a child can't talk, things like that. I mean, ultimately, if we really, really think about it, if command center, the brain, is not firing or connecting or doing the things that it needs to, we're going to see symptoms of that disorganization, right? So a lot of what I was teaching my parents at the time was how can we help and nurture the brain in order to get better and lasting results? Now, I mean, at the time I was, God, how old was I? 22, 23. I was very new to the field, not a parent myself. And the number one question I was getting, particularly from dads, was my child's not sleeping. We're exhausted. We are seemingly doing all the right things. We've got a big physical therapy program. We're doing great nutritional things, blah, 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 but it's still not happening. And they would ask me, what can I do? And I was like, beats me. I don't know. But for me, intuitively, there is always a solution and there's always an answer to the problem that is at hand. Now, sometimes it might be that we're years and years away from finding that solution, but it's there. So when that question continually comes up and it's well, I can't answer it, so I need to figure out what the answer to it is. That kind of took me on just my deep dive of sleep, why it's so important, how, I can help those kids. And as I started to do more and more of that research, and I started to learn about, certain behavioral techniques that you can use to help with sleep, I started to apply that to my clients at the time. And, parents were writing back to me like within a few weeks of like, okay, it's something we've been struggling with now for 5, 6, 7 years. Within 3 or 4 weeks is resolved. Right. So, and then like, not to toot my own horn or whatever, but it was like, oh, okay, like we're on to something here, like something, something's clicking. So, and again, like when I see enough of that changing in the office and with my patients, I was like, well, shoot, maybe this is something I need to get certified in doing. So, ultimately that kind of led me to a program called Sleep Sense, which was started by Dana Obelman, who's Canadian. So I got personally trained by her. And once I learned those techniques, I realized like how they needed to be adapted and changed for the special needs community. And, in addition to just integrating a lot of the other things that I know, just being a therapist myself, that has kind of brought me to where I am today. Because for me, I knew like, all right, these are just my patients here in the office. But I mean, I'm trying to think what was the last statistic I saw. I think it's like 1 in 6 or 1 in 10 kids, at least in the US, have some kind of neurodevelopmental diagnosis. So it was like, well, shoot, like it's not just my patients who are having this issue. Other kids I know are having this issue. So, ultimately, like as I started to branch out and I started to talk to more and more families, like I realized just how little support there was for the whole sleep issue. And I think for the special needs families that are out there, I'm sure they can relate to the like kind of typical scenario of like these parents go to their pediatrician or whatever, and they're like, what do we do about it? And, basically the answer they get is like, well, here's some melatonin. If that doesn't work, come back and we'll start some medications. So, they kind of, I think a lot of professionals see these kids and they don't think they could understand, making changes around sleep hygiene and this and that. And, so many times now I've seen like, here are these kids who are just getting melatonin and medication, and all we needed to do were make some very light adjustments in that sleep routine, how they're getting to sleep. And, now they're sleeping for the better for the long term. I mean, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, couple thoughts, and then I've got a variety of questions. But
Sure.
so first thought is, I remember growing up, my mom was like notorious in terms of like I played sports growing up, and if I had a bad game or I didn't perform well, she always asked, "So how was your sleep? How
Oh,
did you
that's
sleep
so
the night
good.
before?" And so she was always on me like, "Drew, you need to go to bed. You got to get a good sleep. You got to do all these things." Now that's beyond, the age and stage of, where we really struggle as parents.
Right.
So anyways, I just want to share that story. So I've kind of had this ingrained in me that sleep is important right from an early age.
That's
So I
great.
want to transition to talk though, the dad that or the person that Ed was talking about in terms of, sleep is for suckers.
Yeah.
Many people have this idea, whatever, I'll sleep when I'm dead, whatever. I'll just, push through all these other things. I want to talk. Can you tell us, why is sleep so important? And why
Sure.
does it matter for us as parents? And then why does it matter so much for children?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can talk about sleep and its importance and like just what happens from night to night. And I think this will like really talk to that study that you referenced to earlier of like, you almost have this kind of intoxicated feel, right? When you're not sleeping, when you're not sleeping enough. But like basically what happens is, and again, like I know about this from like the neurological standpoint, because that's my bread and butter. I talk about that day in and day out. But when we sleep at night, basically there are two major things that are happening. Number one, the brain is transferring everything from like temporary storage to permanent storage. So it's like taking it off the USB stick and putting it in the cloud. The things that, we learned that day, the information we picked up on, stuff like that. So that's number one. But number two is the brain actually does spring cleaning each and every night as well. So everything that we just booted up to permanent storage, the brain's like, okay, what's the important stuff that we need to keep? And what's the junk that we can like kind of forget about, not remember, blah, blah, blah. So that's happening. And then also cerebral spinal fluid is going in and out, cleaning things away. So dead brain cells, the connections between those brain cells, like if there's stuff that's not working, the brain is going to want to get rid of it so it can run more efficiently. So like if you're not getting enough sleep, that junk literally just builds up. And that's where you might feel like that kind of intoxicated feeling. It's because it's full of junk that like we need to get rid of right now. So, I think when I talk about sleep with my parents, that resonates with them, especially, families who have neurodivergent kids. Like it's especially important that their brain and body is getting the chance to do all of that stuff. That way, like they wake up in the morning, they've got a clean slate. They're ready to learn. The brain is primed for taking all that information in. So that's especially important. In addition to like, it helps to just put kids in better moods, like the hyperactivity, the tantrums, the meltdowns, like everything becomes so much more calm when a kid is just consistently getting a good night's rest. And for parents, it's the same. I mean, we all need that benefit of like organizing, spring cleaning each and every night. That way we can just start the next day fresh and ready to go. Like for a lot of parents, I mean, the amount of responsibilities that you all have of like, we got to get this person to do this thing. We have this, we have school, we have like there's a lot to keep on top of. And for my special needs families out there, like, there's 10 more things on that pile. So, as when I first talk to parents about their child's sleep, like so much of the focus that they have is on like, I want my kid to be better rested, so they're getting more out of therapy or this or that. But it's like, yeah, but for you as well, if you want to be the best caregiver, you need to be prioritizing your sleep. That way, your focus, your attention, your own emotional regulation is there so you can best support your child day in and day out. So I mean, in that sense, like sleep is super, super impactful. And unfortunately, just like a very often forgotten and just kind of like, brushed under the rug component of brain growth and development for kids, but just like general health and well-being. Now, I mean, granted, like, I think since I started doing this 7 years or so ago, it's changed a lot. Like, I think the mindset around sleep has, for the most part, gotten better, although there are still these like hashtag sleep is for suckers people out there. But, fortunately, like the mindset around it has started to change a bit, but there's still a ways to go.
Okay. Well, that's cool hearing the two biological functions, right, that sleep provides, and that makes a lot of sense, and it seems just so very important. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you didn't have to convince me, but I'm hoping that great analogy really helps somebody who's listening. Is like, well, I don't know how crucial it is. That sounds pretty crucial to me.
Yeah. Well, and I think like the fact that your mom, even like when you were playing sports, like she knew to ask like, how was your sleep the night before, is huge. And again, because my area of expertise, like from a therapy standpoint, is motor development. I am always telling my families like, hey, listen, early morning time, you need to let your kids sleep. That's where that motor cortex is like doing its extra work. So if we're working on motor things, we need to get that extra sleep to make sure it's like really solidifying. And I mean, for any athlete, like kid, teenager, adult, it's like getting a good night's rest just to let the body recuperate is important. But it's, for your focus and attention, it's really important. And I know I play rec sports myself, and with some of my teammates, I'm always like, yeah, how's your sleep been? And they'll complain, they'll say it's a disaster and this and this and
Right.
this. So yeah, it's so again, kudos to your mom for picking up on that.
Thank you. Yeah, she was great. Ed, you want to hop in?
Yeah, I don't know in the work that you and your team do, but what impact does nutrition have on a child's sleep? I don't know if that's something you get into, but I would have a feeling that it would have an impact on sleep. If you could share any perspectives on that, that'd be helpful for our dads and families.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and well, I will say first of all, for my team and I, like it is a part of every single sleep plan that we give to our families. Now, it's individualized from kid to kid. Some kids, there's a lot of work we got to put in, and then other kids, it's easier. But generally, with regards to nutrition, the thing we all have to keep in mind is that our digestive tract has hundreds of millions of neurons, like actual neurons there. And the job of the dirty work has been relegated there. Like it's, Mother Nature has put neurons there because it's like the brain knew I've got too many sophisticated things to do. You guys go down here, you take care of like getting rid of waste and all of that. So nutrition in that sense is really important because if things are going into the body that we really shouldn't be eating, drinking, whatever, what happens is the brain has to divert energy to that digestive system to help it along. But all the plates that are spinning up top here, all the sophisticated things that brain has to do, don't be surprised if some of those plates start to fall, right? So now with the population of kids that my team and I work with, like we have to be very careful because I would say probably like 40% of the kids, I'd say about 40% of the kids we work with are like extremely picky eaters. So, I can't just say to a mom like, hey, you're going to cut out this, 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 and this. And it's like, basically I've just cut out all the foods that this one kid will eat. Right. So, when I talk about nutrition with my families, the first step we talk about is like, what are maybe some foods we can add into the diet in order to give the body what it needs from a vitamin and mineral standpoint? And then number two, are there certain things that maybe we could supplement with before we reduce or take out certain foods? Because again, I've worked with some kids where they only eat, chocolate covered candies, chocolate syrup and this other thing, which is detrimental.
Drew, did she hit on a chord there or something? I just saw that body movement.
Look, my mom was also a strong advocate of healthy nutrition, and it's something that I have an undergraduate degree in kinesiology. I was involved with sports most of my life, still involved with sports in some way, shape, or now. And so, nutrition to me is like one of those core pillars. So hearing that type, especially for kids, I think, but it's the.
Well, and again, my heart goes out to those parents where it's like they've got this many foods they can give their child, because, it's no question, like if you're only eating things from this one food group or you only have 5 foods that you can take, like, obviously, like your brain and body is not getting the magnesium, the calcium, the vitamin B6, like the things it needs to feel more relaxed, to make melatonin naturally. And I think a lot of professionals kind of skip the nutrition step of like, okay, they're not sleeping well, let's just give them melatonin, when it's like, no, maybe we should give them the minerals they need to make it on their own. So we don't have to, resort to an over-the-counter thing to make it happen. But Ed, again, to answer your question, like it's a huge component of what I teach families. It's just depending on the family, depending on the kid, we might have to take smaller steps to get there and to realize, what things that child specifically needs to have a good night's rest from, that nutritional standpoint.
Thanks for sharing, Drew. Back to you, because I know Drew has a lot of things he wants to share. Go ahead.
I do. Well, I want to ask questions and learn. So you mentioned a couple terms earlier. You talked about sleep routine and sleep hygiene. We don't necessarily need to go into that right now, but I wanted to talk about the fact that those are important, and somebody might not know what those mean. So actually, you know what? Let's do that. Can you talk about sleep routine and sleep hygiene, and then we'll build from there?
Yeah, yeah. So when we talk about sleep hygiene and really like routine is kind of like a sub, they're not two separate things. It's really just like a little addition to sleep hygiene. And basically sleep hygiene is like an umbrella term that talks about like the environmental changes we need to make for a better night's sleep, the routine changes, the scheduling changes, um, and ultimately, specifically, like in the realm of kids, talking about how we can teach a child their own kind of self-regulation, self-soothing strategies to get to sleep, right? But the first three are the most important: environment, routine, and scheduling, right? So, with environment, with my families, I'll talk about level of darkness in the room, the temperature. Are there additional sounds that we can kind of eliminate just to make it as peaceful and cave-like as possible? And then with the routine, our brains and body, like, it craves predictability. It wants predictability, right? So if we're following the same list of things going to sleep each night, like get into PJs, brush your teeth, use the bathroom, read a book, go to bed, the more consistently we follow it, it just becomes second nature. Like, we'll just start to automatically go through those steps. And the brain knows, okay, when this happens, it means it's time to go to bed. And it becomes easier for a child or adult, I mean anybody, it becomes easier for you to fall asleep. You're more settled going into sleep, because the brain is just following that same shutdown mode each and every night, right? Now, for the population of kids that I work with, we will incorporate certain like sensory friendly activities, because for a lot of kids, the inability to go to sleep is actually a sign that the brain hasn't gotten enough of the sensory things that it needs during the day, or maybe the brain got a little too much information and it's not really sure what to do with itself. So for my neurodivergent population, we'll put certain techniques into that routine. We'll bump it out and make it a little bit longer in order to make sure that, like, not just the practical needs, but the neurological, the sensory needs are also met before bedtime.
Can you give us like an example of
Yeah, sure.
activities or differences?
Yeah, so like for some of my kids, I have a lot of children that I work with who are just like constantly on the go. It's either they're sitting or they're running. Like, there's no in between. So for those kids, that's actually a sensory seeking like behavior, if you're going to call it a behavior, right? So the brain wants that movement, that proprioceptive, sensory area of the brain is like seeking for more and more movement. So they're constantly on the go. So it naturally, before we go to sleep each night, maybe we need to give them a little bit more movement before they go to sleep, so the brain is a bit more satiated, right? So that could be some time in the sensory swing, or we do a different, a little physical activity before we go to sleep. Something else that I use with a lot of my kids is joint compression massage, which is, it's different from like a muscle massage. You're like just very gently pushing all the major joints of the body together. And again, for that kid who's constantly on the go, or the kid who really seeks like tight hugs and needs that touch comfort to go to sleep, by doing that before bedtime, again, the brain is getting what it needs. That child is less likely to look for that stuff middle of the night, because a lot of those kids, like, they might have a hard time getting to sleep, or they're up at 2 a.m. and the brain's like, all right, I didn't get enough of this, so let's go find it. And everybody's like pulling their hair out. But so those are like two of the like classic examples of something that I might incorporate in a routine for a child who might have some sensory processing things, just to help, just like get everything to calm down again. Yeah. So we talked about, let's see, routine. We talked about environment, and then the scheduling. Yeah. And scheduling, I mean, obviously for most kids, like, the more sleep they're getting, the better, ultimately. The more time they have in bed to go through the processes of the organization and the spring cleanup, and their, from a neurological standpoint, is really important. But, every kid's sleep needs are a little bit different. So it's just figuring out, what that schedule is that's going to work not only for your child, but for the family dynamic as well. Drew, I know you mentioned like we've got a few kids, we got to get to bed. So sometimes, some kids might be going to bed a little bit later, a little bit earlier, because for the family dynamic, like that's what works best. So as long as parents are consistent with that, ultimately it's going to work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's great. So environment and creating the appropriate sleeping environment, certainly important. Having a pre-bedtime routine to essentially, that consistency seeking, if we know that we brush your teeth, then we put your pajamas on, then you read a book, then that you're basically priming your brain
Mhm.
to go to sleep. And then of course, having a reasonable schedule that maps onto that in terms of when a child will go to bed. Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads. I have to say, we did Dana Obelman's program
Oh, you
with our
did?
twins.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did Dana Obelman's program with our twins in particular. We found
Mhm.
it around around 9 or 10 months old, and that's when we really
Okay.
started to implement it. So let me just say, as a very satisfied customer of Dana's, it works.
Yeah.
But I love the education component in terms of understanding the importance. And I think it's important for your parents to know that there's reasons why sleep is important, and
Yeah.
the more that you can do this, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah.
Because now my twins are 10 years old, and they pretty much on autopilot when it comes to going to bed, right?
Yeah.
And my
Exactly.
one twin like falls asleep like that, and so it's worth the investment in the front end in terms of the time commitment,
Yeah.
and kind of the work to see the results when it comes to now. I have a stepdaughter who's
Mm.
13, and she's terrible at sleeping.
Mhm.
In fact, she can't get to sleep and then is up. And so it's a real challenge because she's had a different, I'd say, from the age of early development. So can you talk
Yeah.
about the importance of when to start these ideas of right environment, proper routine, and scheduling? And then
Yeah.
how do you support that as children develop?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think those three things alone are things that parents can actually fairly easily do, like from day one. Now, we all know, like with a newborn, like their schedule can kind of go back and forth, but the more consistent that parents are about like that room environment and with that routine. I mean, especially if we're looking at a newborn baby, like they can't see, they can't hear things the way that they should yet. Like that's all coming, it's developing, but anything that we can do to help that along, we should, right? So if we're putting baby in as dark of an environment as possible, the brain starts to pick up on the light and dark differences and connects that point of information of like, oh, dark means sleep, light means awake, right? So I don't, honestly, the only parents I talk to about newborn sleep are like it's like the youngest sibling of the special needs kid I worked with like 4 years ago, right? But when I talk to parents about that, I tell them, I'm like, look, when they're up from their nap, when the day has started, take them into the brightest room of the house. So again, the brain is getting that visual information. It's time to be awake. And then, with that dark environment, by making it as dark as possible, again, brain picks up on, oh, we're doing the opposite thing now. We're supposed to be sleeping. And it's amazing how quickly young babies pick up on routines of just, even something as simple as like, okay, we change the diaper, we put on PJs, we feed to go to sleep, feed, and then we go to sleep. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible how quickly the routines get picked up on. So, I mean, with those things alone, I mean, that stuff you could easily start from day one, but it's never too late either. And you talked about your stepdaughter. I mean, I've worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of teenagers now where like, I'll ask parents in my first call with them, how was their sleep when they were kids? Most of the time it was just terrible and they've kind of learned to live with it, or they've never even really experienced what a good night's sleep is. So you almost have to go back to that newborn stage of like, okay, let's clean up the environment. Let's get on a routine. Let's create that predictability. And from there, we can build onto that, right? Like we can get into more sophisticated things. We can talk about what are the behavioral things we need to change, or what are those steps that we're going to take in order to get that sleep independence, whatever that looks like. But that core stuff, it's never too early. It's never too late to start it. Yeah.
Well, maybe you could talk about maybe the ideal sleep environment.
Sure. Yeah. So the major things that I talk about with my families are light level, temperature, noise level, and then just like ambiance, I guess if you could say that. So
Okay.
when it comes to dark level, like you have to be in your kid's room, and like if you extend your hand in front of you, if you can still see your hand, it's not dark enough. So, a lot of parents, when I talk to them about this, they'll say, oh yeah, we've got the blackout curtain. It's all fine. And then I have them take me into their kid's room on the laptop, and it's like, there's light coming in from all of the sides. So, in those cases, like we actually put something on the windows itself. So, black trash bags, aluminum foil, something to actually keep the light out of the room. Now, for most kids, I do allow, for like a nightlight. There are some kids who have legitimate fears of being alone or being in the dark, which is okay. But if we're going to use a nightlight, we just got to pick something of a warmer color: red, orange, yellow, pink, something like that. And then with the temperature, I usually recommend trying to keep it around like 20 degrees Celsius, maybe like at most 22, because actually when we sleep at night, our body temperatures do drop a degree or two. And if we're in a warm environment, like our body can't go into the deepest stages of sleep like it's supposed to. Like we're kind of waffling around in the lighter stages. So, and again, a lot of the kids that I work with just tend to run hotter. So if they're in this hot environment, and like, no wonder they're waking up multiple times a night, like just cool down the environment a little bit, and it can make a big difference. Now, one of the tools that I almost never suggest is a white noise machine. Because again, for a lot of my kids that I work with, they have sensory processing issues where like we're putting on a white noise machine and it's just adding to the chaos that they're already hearing. A lot of the kids that I work with are very hypersensitive to sounds, and they can hear the water running through the pipes, the ice machine downstairs. I have parents tell me like the kid knows the trash truck is coming 2 blocks before it actually turns the the corner, right? Like they're that attuned. So if we're adding white noise to it, like it's just one more noise they have to put up with through the night. So this is one of these suggestions that I've made many times over the years. And I've had parents like sign up for that first intake call with me. And they'll tell me on the call, like, oh, we saw your Instagram video about turning off the white noise and now everything's fine. We don't need you anymore. So I'm like, great. Awesome.
Okay.
I've had kids where like I had this one child, he was like 4.5 years old, never slept through the night ever. And I asked the dad, and I was working with the dad actually. And I asked the dad, I was like, have you always used white noise with him? And he said, yeah, like that's just we thought we were supposed to do that. And I didn't make any other changes with this kid. I was like, look, just turn off the white noise, see what happens. And he slept 6 nights in a row through the night, like for the first time ever in his life. Now, granted, like things, we had to do more things, like we needed to keep that up. But the dad was just like, holy moly, we've never seen that happen before ever. Like for over 4 years, this kid had not slept through the night. And that one change made a huge difference. So it's, now granted, like I work with some families who, they live in New York City and it's super busy and super loud. Like, okay, if we need to use white noise to keep that stuff out, so be it. But it's one of these like many tools that parents are either told to get or they get in just like praying and hoping it'll fix the sleep issues that, ultimately when we take it out, it makes things even better. So yeah, I mean, those are the major ones. And like for the sleep environment itself, this is more for like my older kids. I will have parents take their kids in the room and ask them like, what needs to change here, right? Do we need to take something out? Do we need to move something? I've had children tell their parents, like, I want my bed pushed up against the wall because they want the feedback of the wall when they go to sleep at night. Like they need that little extra pressure, or they want to take something out because it puts a funny shadow on their wall at night and they don't like the look of it. So, if you have a child who's old enough, who can communicate enough to tell you like what needs to change, you've got nothing to lose by asking that. And that's something I learned, like talking to adults and working with adults in their sleep. Like if you're going into your room and it doesn't feel calm and relaxing and a place that you want to be in, like you're not going to want to necessarily sleep in there either. So, and honestly, I mean, these are all really simple things. Like, there's a reason why I talk about them in the first call with all of my families of like, just get it done, get it off the checklist. So we know going forward that, these are things that are not aggravating the sleep at night.
Yeah, that's great. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk about some of the barriers to getting good sleep, or barriers to, children falling asleep and sleeping well.
Sure. Happy. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I'm going to talk about it. Like, I'll talk about this, like with the population of kids that I work with, but a lot of those things do carry over to like neurotypical kids as well. So one of the main things that I find comes up with a lot of the special needs population that I work with is that, and we kind of touched on this before, like their neurological needs are not being met well enough during the day, right? So yeah, like we have our PT, we have OT, we have speech, blah, 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 blah. Like there's all these things we're working on, but we're still not hitting the mark. Like we're still missing something. So when the brain is not getting enough of what it needs during the day, it is going to be on the prowl. It's going to look for that help, and it's going to look for that stuff, that information that it needs at really inopportune times. For a lot of my kids on the spectrum that I work with, I mean, I've heard this exact scenario like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. My kid actually falls asleep fairly okay. Like we maybe a little melatonin needed to like make it happen, but we fall asleep okay. It's between 1 to 4 a.m. My kid is up and they're up for 2 hours, 3 hours, or this is when they start their day. So again, a lot of those kids, their sensory needs, their neurological needs are not being met well enough during the day. So again, the brain's on the prowl looking for that help. Or it's, for the kids who have maybe slightly more sensitive systems, their brain is getting overwhelmed by like the amount of light that's in the classroom, the sound of the kids that they've, been around all day long. The brain has gotten too much information. So when this child tries to go to sleep at night, trying to wind down and go to sleep or maintain that sleep becomes really, really, really difficult. So it's a huge aspect of what I teach when it comes to sleep. Because what I've learned is like, you could do all the behavioral things. You can talk about independence and the routine and this and that. But if that neurological component is not getting addressed, like we're only going to get so far with it. So, I mean, that is a huge obstacle when it comes to getting a good night's rest. And I think if we're talking about this in relation to kids that are neurotypical, in that sense, I think the most common thing that I find is that kids are probably not getting enough physical activity during the day. And again, like we've got a system and school where, we have a little bit of recess time, but we're taking all these 5, 6, 7-year-olds and keeping them mostly sedentary through the day without enough of an outlet, being outside, being physically active to warrant the need for a good night's rest. Like there is that balance between like, you just have to burn just enough energy, don't go overboard, but just enough to make sure that sleep can happen. But I would say then, so that's number one. But then number two, if I were going to put a number on it, I'd say like 85% of the kids that I work with have some kind of reliance on mom or dad to get to sleep at night. And Drew, I know you know this from the work that you've done with your kids, but if a child knows how to self-regulate and put themselves to sleep, if they do happen to wake up middle of the night, they can use those skills to get themselves back to sleep. And we all have that routine, right? Like I know for myself, I flip onto my right side for a little bit, I get comfortable, I go to my left, and then I'm out, right? But if I wake up for whatever reason in the middle of the night, I'm going to do the same thing again. So for a lot of my kids, they don't have that ability. And sometimes that's come out of a place of like, here's this kid who spent the first 2 months in NICU, they've had all these medical issues, blah, blah, blah. And, sleep has just not been the priority, but this now 2.5-year-old has learned the only way he can go to sleep is it being held upright against, dad's shoulder and rocked to sleep. Or there's a sensory component to it, right? Like for a lot of my kids, for a lot of the kids that I work with, they need to feel the pressure of like dad's body next to theirs. They need to put their hands under mom's back or put their feet in a certain way in order to get to sleep. And as soon as that changes up, they don't have the ability to do it again. So in addition to like that brain balance, that neurological balance work we have to do, my goal with each and every family my team and I works with is just putting the most gradual plan together where, that child is learning maybe 1 or 2 new skills towards that goal of independence. And once we've managed to get to independence, like, settling back to sleep is so much easier. The middle of the night wake ups that are 3+ hours long start to dissipate. They're not gone completely, but they really significantly improve.
Hmm. I mean, thank you for that, Melissa. I'm wondering, just for time, I would love to actually ask more questions, but I don't think we have time for today. Would you briefly say your thoughts on technology before bed?
Sure. Yeah. So with regards to technology before bed, so my practice with all of my families is that we cut all screens at least 1 hour before bedtime. So that's laptops, tablets, phones, TVs, anything that has that blue screen there, because it can greatly hinder that journey going into sleep, right? So if we're sitting in front of those computers or laptops or whatever, like our brain is getting that blue light and we're literally tricking the brain, like it's still daytime. Don't release the melatonin yet. We're not ready. We're not ready. We're not ready. But now we've pushed bedtime back. We've made it 3 times harder for this kid to fall asleep. And the physiological component that we need of like the melatonin being released into the system is not happening for another hour, hour and a half, whatever. So that's where I usually first start, like at least an hour before bedtime, no screens at all if we can swing it. And for some of the kids that I work with who are more sensitive to that, we'll also talk about like an overall cap on the day. So like, even if we cut screens 5 hours before bedtime, if they've gotten over an hour and a half, like it just revs up their battery too much. So, if we start with that hour before bed, but if we still need to cut from there, then we'll talk about like the 90-minute limit throughout the day to make sure that, we can at least settle to sleep. So I don't know if that's like settled any arguments or whatever. But
No, not in our house. I just know that I think there are many I've seen people don't always have that same sense of the importance of reducing screen time before bedtime or even having limits during the day. So I just appreciate that perspective. So mindful of time, I was hoping I could end with 2 specific questions.
Yeah.
So first one is, what question should dads be asking themselves about sleep and their child? And then the next one is, what's one action dads can take to support better sleep for their child?
Okay. So, well, I mean, look, we've covered a lot of different bases here in this session. I think if a dad is going to ask himself any question about their child's sleep, it's, based on the information here, what are the things that we need to change, or what's the one thing that we can change as a family in order to support my child who is currently struggling with their sleep, right? So we talked about a bunch of things: environment, the routine, sleep independence, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that first question is just, what is the one thing we can do right now that would make a difference in my child's sleep? And then number 2, what action to take is like, take the action, but be consistent with it. Now, specifically with dads, and again, I've learned this over the years, coaching probably a few thousand dads at this point, that, when we go to take action, we need to be consistent on that. So it means that like, we need to give it time to allow, your child to get to that understanding of like, oh, okay, this is the new routine. This is the new way my room looks, whatever. So we have to be consistent and allow time and space for that to develop. And I say that because I think, a lot of the dads that I work with, they tend to want to go like, okay, let's just like keep going. So, a lot of times like what their partner is doing is not exactly what they're doing at night. I think dads always like to go like 1 or 2 steps ahead, or they like to try and go faster through it. So, in addition to just being consistent with whatever that one change is, be sure to don't rush through it either. Like, just take the time you need to put that into action, and be patient. Like, the changes will happen, but we gotta allow that space and time for your child to process and understand that change that you're making.
That's great. Thank you so much, Melissa. Really appreciate that. Ed.
Absolutely.
Time is up. So I was going to ask some things, but in lieu of time, I'll just say thank you to Melissa for taking time out of her positive, productive schedule to share with the Dad Central Show family and the Dad Central family. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah. So you can find me at melissadomansleepconsulting.com. You can find me on Facebook, Melissa Doman Sleep Consulting. I am more on Instagram these days. So you can follow me at Special Needs Sleep Coach. And there I'm posting tips and information a lot at a time. So if you're not sure where to start, that's a good place to start picking up on some new tips and things like that to start carrying you through to a better night's rest.
Well, thank you so much. We'd like to, Drew and myself would like to thank you for taking time again out of your positive, productive schedule. And to you, your team, and all the parents, especially the dads that you're helping,
Yeah.
thank you, and continue success, and look forward to working with you and continuing your success in the near future. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
Have
Appreciate
a
it.
great day. Bye-bye. All right. Sleep is not for suckers.
You're right. It isn't.
Absolutely. Any takeaways?
It's valuable to have the environment, routine, scheduling, right? And how those three work together. So the takeaway is just recognizing as the environment in the way it needs to be, supporting a consistent routine, and is the scheduling mapping onto what you need. And actually, maybe the most important takeaway, consistency. Seems like a good theme when it comes to parenting, consistency.
I know we didn't chat about it too much. I hope we can have Melissa back, but I'd very like to know if she ever asks her parents and dads, what are your sleep habits? And how do the parents' sleep habits, are they influencing their parenting with the kids?
Mhm.
So that's a part two. That's a part two. So let's get to it. As always, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of men, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. We'd like to hear from y'all. She's from Philly, y'all. Well, that's not too north. Maybe that's all right. So email us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. Suggestions, guests, anything. We'd love the feedback. Also, you can watch or listen to our epic conversations on dadcentral.ca/podcasts. And also give us reviews, especially on the Apple platform. And we have lots of free resources on dadcentral.ca. Check us out. So as always, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your positive, productive schedule for watching or listening to our conversation. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Make sure you give yourself grace. I will catch you soon. Be well.